we have, I think it's a humane society. We always have these horrific images of battered animals come up on commercials, right? Dogs and cats that need homes, and um, they've just been done away with. It's really sad. But Sarah McLachlan has a song, and it's "In the Eyes of the Angel." And I'm doing a bad job here, but it's just like such a sad, horrible song. And so we, as Americans, always associate that song with just bad luck, right? Or something horrific. All I could think of watching Charles Leclerc walk off is that song played in the background. Unfortunately, we probably don't have the rights to play the song in the background of this conversation as it pertains to Charles Leclerc
Stacey,
here on Unlapped.
your singing is enough. Do you want to just sing and I'll talk about Leclerc's? Well, it
No,
wasn't even a race, but his
no, because
formation.
I think people will unsubscribe very, very quickly if that continues. All joking aside, song aside, Charles Leclerc starts P2, doesn't even make it past the formation lap. Huge missed opportunity for Ferrari, certainly, as we mentioned, because Mercedes didn't have the pace. What did you make of Charles Leclerc's afternoon? What did it end up being? A hydraulic issue of some sort?
They thought it was a hydraulic issue because it looked like the steering went heavy, which is linked to the hydraulics, the power steering system. And then it looked like the gearbox seized in some kind of way because that's what spun him out. But they later found out it was something different. They were a bit cagey on exactly what it was. But I think something that was controlling the hydraulic system failed rather than the hydraulic system itself. I mean, it doesn't really matter either way, does it? If a car ends up in the barrier on its way to the grid, when I first saw it, I thought, "Oh no, Charles, what have you done?" Like, because it's been a brilliant run of qualifying for him recently, but races have not been great. And so I thought, "Oh God, what have you done?" And and then it turned out that it wasn't him; it was the car. But it doesn't make it. It pretty makes it even harder for him. And as he said, he is pretty much the unluckiest person. I think he used some slightly more colourful language along the way as well, but. Yeah, to be that unlucky, to be second on the grid, he's been pole the last two races before that. Okay, he got a podium in Mexico, but yeah, still to then have that happen. I don't know. I just don't know what you can say to someone like that. I suppose the only benefit is that at least it isn't during a season when he's competing for the championship. But you kind of get the feeling that if he was, then these kind of things are the kind of things that would rip it away from him at the last few races.
I don't want to carry on this list, but you can find his results on the entire season and DNFs, penalties, issues with the car, a variety of different issues at different points. I mean, there's only a handful of clean races with no issues where he certainly finishes in the points because we know he's capable of that. You mentioned unlucky. In my time covering the sport, which is more recent certainly than yours, have you ever seen a driver plagued quite like Charles Leclerc is?
I honestly don't know if I have. I mean, you have seasons where things seem to go against drivers. I guess a really obvious example was 2016, where Lewis Hamilton was up against Nico Rosberg at Mercedes. They had by far the best car, so it was down to those two who was going to win the championship. And Lewis's first four races, I think, he was struggling to even put points on the board. He was having grid penalties early on because of reliability issues. And so Rosberg built up this big lead early on. And then it looked like Lewis was going to come back and he was leading the Malaysian Grand Prix and his Mercedes engine spat a load of fire out the back and failed in him. So I don't know, off the top of my head, that was a very unlucky season for one driver that led to Nico Rosberg winning it. But with Leclerc, it just seems constant, doesn't it? It just seems to stretch over seasons as well. There's a Leclerc curse we talk about in Monaco. And it just feels like everything is kind of working a little bit against him. And I think what makes it all the more frustrating is the flashes of brilliance he shows. So those pole positions that he gets, and you're like, wow, how a car which we know is not easy to drive, this year's Ferrari, it's got a lot of rear instability, yet he seems to live with it somehow. Sets up the car in a way that he doesn't like. That's one thing he's had to do throughout the season to deal with the fundamental issues with the handling of the car, and yet still goes and gets pole positions. And then for that to happen, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what to say anymore. And what's more, he is also a really lovely person. Like he's actually a really nice guy. You can't help but feel sorry for him when things go wrong to him. I mean, I wouldn't wish kind of failures on the formation lap on any of the drivers on the grid, but yeah, Leclerc especially. You just feel like you want to put your arm around him and tell him it's going to be okay. But I don't think I can.
He's
Ferrari are
easy
in
to
such a
root
mess.
for. I think he's very
Yeah.
easy to root for. So you feel for him with the waves of bad luck that he's had this season. And to your point, middle of last season is when the bad luck kind of seemed to start happening for him. So it's spanned 2 seasons now. So can't just imagine where he is mentally. His teammate though, Carlos Sainz, is in a tight battle for P4 in the driver's standings. So he needs a strong finish. Ferrari's 20 points behind Mercedes for P2 in the constructors. We obviously mentioned the lack of pace for Mercedes. 2 races remain. Do you feel like Ferrari has it in them to leapfrog Mercedes at the tail end here? You're starting to smile.
Well, I know, just on the basis of Brazil, it's who's going to throw it away, not really who's going to win it, right? It's like who's going to either get the setup so wrong in a race that they can't compete like Mercedes did, or who's going to have reliability issues that means the car doesn't even make it to the grid. So it could come down to that. Genuinely, I mean, it's not unusual for positions in championships to be decided by mistakes rather than on the merit of results. So yeah, it's going to be close. I don't know if I can pick it anymore. Like the Ferrari still looks like the faster car in qualifying. That's been pretty much the case throughout the year. And then the other thing we could say conversely to that is that the Mercedes consistently has been the faster of those two cars in the race. But of course that went away in Brazil. So it's an interesting one. Of course, going into Vegas, I know we're going to talk a lot more about that probably in the next podcast we do. But we've got a track that no one knows, unusually cold temperatures for a Formula One race, which is going to play havoc with getting the tires working, and the potential for a lot to happen in that race. I think a lot of potential chaos as well. So that will be key, and especially for Ferrari. I think it's at this stage when sometimes it's nice to be the team that's chasing down another team, but at this stage, you want to be in Mercedes' position and have that points buffer so that any mistake perhaps does get covered up by the points buffer, and then you go on and score points at the final round in Abu Dhabi and make sure it happens. So I'd still put my money on Mercedes.
Okay.
So I do believe Brazil was a bit of a one-off, but it really could be thrown away by either side.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.